Title: The Ghost DNA Hidden Inside 2 Billion People Today. In 2010, scientists sequenced DNA from a finger bone fragment pulled from Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. The bone was small enough to fit in a matchbox. The DNA it contained introduced the world to an entirely unknown species of human being, one that had never appeared in the fossil record, never been assigned a name, never been discussed in any textbook. The Denisovans. And the reason this matters to billions of people alive today is that a significant portion of the human population is still carrying Denisovan DNA in their genomes right now. The story begins in 2008, when archaeologists excavating Denisova cave found a finger bone fragment from the deepest layer of the site. The bone was so small and fragmentary that it could not be identified by shape alone. The only way to learn anything meaningful from it was through DNA extraction, and in 2010 the paleogeneticist Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig succeeded in sequencing the mitochondrial DNA from the bone. The result was unlike anything in the database. It was not modern human. It was not Neanderthal. The divergence from both was too great. They were looking at a third lineage, a species of human that had split from the Neanderthal line roughly 400,000 years ago, had lived in Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, had interbred with at least 2 different populations of modern humans, and had then vanished, leaving no bones the world knew about until that cave in Siberia. The Denisovans are still defined almost entirely by DNA. The physical evidence from the cave site consists of the original finger bone, 3 teeth, a fragment of skull, and a toe bone. That is essentially the entire Denisovan fossil record. There is no skull, no postcrania, no skeleton. What researchers know about their physical appearance has had to be inferred from the genome, which has been sequenced in high quality from the finger bone and one of the teeth. The genetic reconstruction suggests they were large-bodied, with broad skulls and potentially darker skin than Neanderthals. A tooth found at the site was initially mistaken for a cave bear tooth because of its enormous size. But the most important thing about the Denisovans is not their bones. It is their DNA, specifically the DNA they left behind in the living human population. When modern humans left Africa and spread across Asia, they encountered Denisovans. They did not simply coexist with them. They interbred. The evidence for this is in the genomes of people alive today. East Asian populations carry approximately 0.2% Denisovan DNA on average. Mainland Southeast Asian populations carry somewhat more, but the highest concentrations are found in Oceania, in Papua New Guinea, the indigenous peoples of Australia, and the Pacific Islands. Papuans carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry in their genomes. Across the entire population of South and Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Oceania, roughly 2 billion people, some portion of the genome traces back to Denisovans. The introgression was not a single event. Analysis of the patterns of Denisovan ancestry in different modern populations suggests there were at least 3 separate episodes of interbreeding between modern humans and different Denisovan populations. One that contributed to the ancestry of East Asians and some continental populations, one that contributed heavily to Papuans and Pacific Islanders, and potentially a third that affected populations in South Asia and Oceania. What did modern humans get from these encounters? In most cases, the inherited Denisovan DNA appears to be neutral, neither particularly beneficial nor harmful, simply present as a genomic passenger from an ancient interbreeding event. But in one case, the contribution has been significant enough to consider adaptive. The EPAS1 gene variant that allows Tibetan people to live and work at high altitude without the polycythemia, the dangerous overproduction of red blood cells, that afflicts most lowland populations at altitude traces directly to Denisovan introgression. The variant is found at high frequency in Tibetans, at low frequency in Han Chinese, and is essentially absent from other populations. It is present in the Denisovan genome. The most likely explanation is that an ancestral population of humans picked up this gene variant from Denisovans during an interbreeding event in Asia, and it spread through the Tibetan population because it conferred a significant survival advantage in high-altitude environments. There may be other examples. Research into the functional significance of inherited archaic DNA from both Neanderthals and Denisovans is ongoing. Some variants appear to be related to immune function, potentially giving early modern humans advantages against pathogens that Neanderthals and Denisovans had already evolved resistance to during their longer residency in Eurasia. The ghost description comes from the near absence of physical remains. What we know of the Denisovans is almost entirely molecular, their existence reconstructed from nucleotides rather than bones. They lived across a vast geographic range, from the Siberian Altai to the Tibetan Plateau to Southeast Asia. Their range overlapped with Neanderthals in the west, with modern humans migrating from Africa in the east and south, and they interbred with both. A Denisovan Neanderthal hybrid individual was actually identified from the same Denisova cave in 2018, a girl whose mother was a Neanderthal and whose father was a Denisovan, direct evidence of first-generation hybridization between the two lineages. The Denisovans represent what paleoanthropology looks like when the physical evidence runs out and the molecular evidence takes over. Before ancient DNA techniques made it possible to sequence genomes from 100,000-year-old bones, the Denisovans would simply have been unknown. Their finger, bone assigned to some existing category, their teeth misidentified, their contribution to human genetics invisible. The science that revealed them did not exist 20 years ago. There are likely other ghost populations still to be found. Statistical analysis of modern human genomes has identified signals in some African populations consistent with introgression from an unknown archaic hominin, one that has left no physical remains at all, known only as a pattern in the DNA of its descendants. The Denisovans, when they were first identified, were exactly that, a statistical anomaly in a dataset, pointing to something real that had not yet been named. The full picture of what our species is, genetically, ancestrally, evolutionarily, is still being assembled. And it turns out that the story is not simply modern humans replacing everyone else. It is modern humans meeting others, mixing with them, carrying pieces of them forward, and arriving at the present with genomes that are palimpsests of encounters stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. 2 billion people carry a fragment of a people who left almost nothing behind, just a finger bone in a Siberian cave, and a ghost in the code of the living.